The reason why, Rex, people listen to this podcast, this 2025 prediction podcast, is to hear exactly who we think are going to win the major championships in 2025. In a lot of ways, this should be the easiest thing to predict, and yet I think our success rate on these is about 4%. So let's start with the Masters, the year's first major, the major we can't wait to get to, and then by the time it ends, we're also a little bit frustrated as well. Who is going to win the Masters in 2025 and why?
I have 3 names written down, and none of them are Scotty.
Nope. You can only have one. You can there can only be one player who slips into the green jacket.
I initially wrote down Colin Morikawa. Played well last year at the Masters. His ball striking obviously is the weapon that he would use on that particular golf course, second shot golf course, all the things we can sit and talk about it. And then I took to my black Sharpie and crossed out that name very quickly as you were talking about Xander, because Xander also played well there. And you look at what he's done just to become more consistent off the tee and with his iron play. And when he is playing well, I'm not sure there's a golf course that doesn't fit him. And then I fell back to, I'm not quite sure how I got here. I went back to Bryson DeChambeau because he's played well there in the past. You look at what he could do.
No, he hasn't. Bryson's played terrible at the Augusta National.
No. He played well as an amateur there. I covered that. I mean, he finished in the top 10, I think, that first year. He hasn't been great there since then. So of those 3 names, I think I'm going to fall back on Xander for the reasons I pointed out. I just think he's much more of a complete player now, much more of a 5-tool kind of guy. I really like Xander there.
I mean, Scotty's going to win the Masters, but for the sake of argument,
have him down for
another name. Yeah, I actually think Xander Schauffele is going to win the Masters as well. It'd be the 3rd leg of the career Grand Slam. I gave me a little bit of pause, and that just 6. I was surprised by this. Just 6 of Xander's 26 career rounds at Augusta National have been in the 60s. But I think you could make the argument now that he's a different player, not just physically and from a skill standpoint, but also mentally, ticking off the 2 major championships that he did in 2024. Iron play is by far and away the most important asset at Augusta National, and Xander Schauffele has improved that significantly over the years, was 6th in that category in 2024. He's just so complete of a player. If Sky does not win the Masters for the 3rd time in 4 years, I do think Xander Schauffele will get his first green jacket. How about the PGA Championship, which in 2025, Rex, will be played at Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte?
You brought up JT. I like JT there. He won the PGA Championship there just a few years ago. You talk about what he does well. And I mean, it's interesting if you look at his stats now, he is not nearly as long or as powerful off the tee as he used to be. And look, I think that's part of the game sort of trending younger and younger. And even though JT's still on the youngest side, he's not part of that generation. I just feel like there's a comfort level on that golf course. And I'll go back to what you touched on. I think there was an epiphany that if he's willing to accept it, if he's willing to read the sort of the how the stars are aligning, if you look at what happened in the Bahamas for pretty much the entire week, he led the field off the tee. He led the field strokes gained tee to green. He was dead last in that field when it came to strokes gained putting. He has to understand, and all you got to do is look to Scotty as a paradigm of hope here, that, man, I've got to do something. Doing the same thing over and over again, definition of insanity. I'm not quite sure if you go to Phil Kenyon or if you find someone else. You've got to figure out a way to be average when it comes to putting at that level. And I think if he makes that epiphany, that breakthrough, I love him at Quail Hollow.
Completely agree with you. You mentioned the driving distance. It was sort of a drop off. It could have been mechanical. He had that weird diet where he wasn't eating like gluten or something, but he was losing weight. He was losing distance. That was a failed experiment. Justin Thomas is now feeling better. He implemented that longer driver. You remember at the Hero World Challenge, led the field in driving that week. He said he would sort of use that on a spot start basis. You could certainly see him using that at Quail Hollow, which is going to be stretched out to 76, 77, 7,800 yards. I'm going to go if he's driving it on a string, it's Rory McIlroy. Like Quail Hollow Club has set up perfectly for him in the past. He has 2 wins there. Like if he's putting the ball in play, hitting at 330 off the tee, he is going to win there. However, I don't think that's actually going to happen. Rory McIlroy and the major championships, still a little bit of a cursed scenario. So I'm going to go in a different direction, Rex, with Ludwig Åberg. I was shocked that Ludwig, the big Swede, did not win in 2024. I think it sort of remains to be seen just how much the knee issue that he had that sort of popped up in April and May affected him for the remainder of that season. But if he can improve, if Ludwig can improve his short game and putting, which are the only weaknesses that he has in his game. Like, this is a guy who is built to last for the long haul. I mean, he's just such a proficient ball striker, great driver of the golf ball, so solid, unflappable. Yes, I'd love to see him win more before he sort of makes that leap to a major champion in 2025. But hey, you got 4 months to get there before you get to the PGA Championship. How about the U.S. Open, Rex, which again will be played at Oakmont in 2025, the biggest, beastliest golf course you could possibly imagine?
Goldie, I'm going to help you out. It was the 1603 mark that Lav picked Rory just for a brief moment to win a major championship, just so we could circle back around and clip that for social media. This is where it all comes home for me. It's Scotty at Oakmont. You look at how hard that golf course, you look at the sort of the legacy of that course about just being a brutal test. I'm not quite sure there's anyone in the game that when every aspect of that game is on, he can make even Oakmont look easy. And I would expect after what happened last year at Pinehurst, and we've talked about a lot about it, where he clearly showed up at Pinehurst not prepared for what that test was asking him to do. He spent a lot of time, and what do you want to call those wild areas, and just wasn't prepared to play those shots. And I think it frustrated him. And in his mind, that was a wasted opportunity when I'm at the peak of my powers and I need to make the most of this window, however long it's going to be. And I wasted that opportunity. Now, there were a lot of other things going on in Scotty's life, to be fair. Not only did he spend a morning in jail in Kentucky, but he also had a baby and the family and everything else that goes into it. But I think he comes into this year's U.S. Open very, very hungry and ready to play that particular golf course.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make. And so Scotty mentioned after the U.S. Open how he had a really difficult time identifying sort of his sight lines and his target lines off the tee, because you have the native areas and you have like the dusty, undulating fairways that he had just a really difficult time. Oakmont is not that. Like, you know exactly where you need to go. The rough is going to be thick. It's going to be very well defined. Scotty has the capability of dialing back off the tee and hitting that fairway finder that will prove very successful. The only question you have, and that's going to be the ultimate stress test for Scotty's revamped putting stroke, because those greens are going to be absolutely lightning fast, tons of slope to them. It'll be very interesting to see how Scotty plays there. I'm going to go in a different direction. A live player finally will win a major. It will be Jon Rahm. For me, a quieter 2024. I believe you called him the biggest disappointment in our Superlatives podcast, for which you also went viral for that. But Jon Rahm is still very much in the prime of his career, 30 years old. He is best suited for this major championship, as we saw a few years ago at Torrey Pines. He is a driving machine that is going to be of paramount importance at Oakmont. And although he sort of had the reputation earlier in his career of being a hothead, to me, he's actually one of the most mentally strong players, is able to sort of channel that energy that he feels, the anger, and sort of put it in a positive direction. 4 top 12 finishes in the last 5 years at the U.S. Open. How about Royal Portrush, a return there after just a couple years ago? We were just there in 2019 with Shane Lowry, who will win the Open Championship this time around in 2025.
Goldie, 1958 timestamp. Rory McIlroy wins the Open Championship at Royal Portrush. We all remember how it started last time at Royal Portrush. Look, this was going to be an emotional week going to Northern Ireland to try to win the Open Championship with Rory, and he somehow found a sliver of out of bounds right off the first tee. So it didn't start all that well for him. Look, this is going to be a tough argument, and just like you always seem to lean back on Xander Schauffele as the player of the year, I always seem to lean back on Rory finally winning a major championship. I have less confidence that eventually I'm going to be right and eventually you're going to be right when it comes to Xander, simply because there is a window when it comes to Rory. Like, he does not have an unlimited window of opportunity to keep winning major championships. And I think when it comes to this particular one, there is going to be a lot of pressure and there is going to be a lot of eyeballs, and he's going to be asked questions pretty much starting at the beginning of the year about, is his focus on that particular event? I think it will be. And if you look at what he has done with his game, certainly towards the end of last season, you have to like, at least from the start, what we've seen in a very limited sample size, that I'm going to focus just on how my body moves. I'm going to quit worrying about the aesthetics and exactly where the ball goes. He's going to try to figure out the best way for him to execute under pressure like he did not do at Pinehurst. I'm picking Rory.
Roy will be 36 years old by the time the Open Championship rolls around at Royal Portrush. This is his last best chance to win a major championship at home. There's going to be so much pressure. there's going to be so much attention. We saw how he handled that in 2019. The thing that I like, to your point, Rex, and sort of the changes that Roy's made in the late stages of 2024, he is trying to essentially make his golf swing more efficient, less reliant on timing. He's trying to make it so he's basically on autopilot, where there's less thinking, the positions are better, and he can just go out and play a la Scotty Scheffler. That's sort of the model for efficiency and steadiness. So that way, when you get into an emotional situation like Roy found himself in at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst this year, there's fewer moving parts, and you can just sort of plod your way around the golf course instead of not really knowing how your body is going to stack up. He's got 8 months to bet in those changes that he's making to sort of bring that efficiency to his game and to sort of take out some of the emotional elements and sort of the fragility that he has in crunch time. I do think he'll handle it better than 2019 because it couldn't have gotten much worse, but I also don't think that he's going to stack up to the moment. I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here, Rex, with another LIV player. I'm going Tyrrell Hatton as my Open champion in 2025. He was fourth in the LIV standings in 2024. He closed out the year, Rex, going 1-2-6-5 in official world golf ranking events, playing some of the best golf of his career. And although his major championship record is not great, the Open actually represents one of his best chances to win a couple of top 20s in this major in the last 3 years. Tyrrell Hatton's still very much been the prime of his career. I don't see any reason why he would have a drop in form now that he's sort of settled in to what his new normal is on LIV.